Dr. Naomi Jackson sat quietly in the Carson County Courthouse, her navy suit crisp, watching Judge Harold Grayson sneer as he stripped a black family's home away. Mid-ruling, his eyes locked on her. "Out, spectator," he barked, assuming she was nothing. She stayed unflinching. He slammed his gavel, victory smug on his face, while her pen froze, her gaze burned with a hidden truth. This moment would unravel him. What secret could turn his world upside down? Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from. If justice matters to you, hit like and subscribe for more gripping tales. Dr. Naomi Jackson sat in the dimly lit gallery of the Carson County Courthouse in Atlanta, Georgia. Her posture straight as a steel rod, her navy suit pressed to perfection against the worn wooden bench. At 42, she carried the quiet confidence of a woman who had fought her way through ivy-covered law schools and skepticism-drenched boardrooms. Today, though, she was not here to argue a case. She was here to watch, her deep brown eyes narrowing as Judge Harold Grayson presided over the courtroom like a king on a crumbling throne. His black robe swished with every impatient gesture, his thinning gray hair slicked back, a permanent scowl etched into his pale, lined face. Below him, the Wilsons, a black couple in their late 50s, sat clutching each other's hands, their faces tight with dread. They were fighting to keep their small brick home on the edge of the city, a place they had poured 2 decades of sweat and savings into, now threatened by Apex Realty, a white-owned development firm with deep pockets and deeper connections. CY, trial had barely begun, but the air already stank of inevitability. Jamal Evans, the Wilsons' attorney, stood at the plaintiff's table, his wiry frame vibrating with determination. At 31, he was young, earnest, and outmatched, his cheap suit a stark contrast to the gleaming leather briefcase of Victor Slade, Apex's attorney. Slade leaned back in his chair, his blonde hair perfectly combed, a smirk playing on his thin lips as he shuffled papers that reeked of privilege. Jamal cleared his throat and began his opening statement, his voice steady despite the weight pressing down on him. "Your Honor, this case is about more than property lines. It's about justice. The Wilsons have lived in their home for over 20 years, paid every tax, maintained every inch of that land. Apex Realty's claim is built on a flimsy technicality, a forged signature on a deed transfer they can't even verify." He held up a stack of yellow documents, the Wilsons' proof of ownership, his hands trembling slightly as he placed them on the table. Judge Grayson adjusted his glasses, peering down from the oak bench with a look that could curdle milk. "Save the speeches, Mr. Evans," he snapped, his voice a low rumble that filled the room. "I'm not here for fairy tales. Stick to the law." The rebuke landed like a slap, and Jamal faltered, his shoulders dipping for just a moment before he pressed on, pointing to the tax records, the notarized deed, the years of evidence. Across the room, the Wilsons sat in silence, their fingers interwoven so tightly their knuckles paled. Mrs. Wilson's eyes darted to Grayson, searching for mercy, while Mr. Wilson stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched, his calloused hands betraying a lifetime of labor now at risk. Grayson barely glanced at them, his attention shifting to Slade, who rose with the ease of a man who knew the game was rigged. "Your Honor," Slade began, his tone smooth as polished marble. "Apex Realty acquired this property through legal channels. The Wilsons' deed is outdated, irrelevant. They've squatted on land that no longer belongs to them." He slid a crisp, freshly printed document across the table, his smirk widening as Grayson nodded approvingly. "We're not here to evict out of malice. We're here to build progress, something this city needs." The words dripped with condescension, and Naomi's grip tightened on the leather-bound notebook in her lap. She saw it all, the way Grayson's eyes lingered on Slade, the way he dismissed Jamal's objections with a flick of his wrist, the way he leaned forward when Apex spoke and slouched when the Wilson side had the floor. It was subtle, but it was there, a tilt in the scales so blatant it made her stomach churn. Halfway through Slade's argument, Jamal objected again, his voice rising with frustration. "Your Honor, that deed transfer lacks a notary seal. It's inadmissible without authentication." Grayson's scowl deepened, and he banged his gavel hard enough to make the gallery flinch. "Overruled, Mr. Evans. I've seen enough to know what's what. Sit down before I hold you in contempt." The threat hung heavy, and Jamal sat, his face flushed with helpless anger. Naomi couldn't take it anymore. She stood, her heels clicking against the marble floor, her voice cutting through the tense silence. "Your Honor, if I may, Rule 32 of the Georgia Code requires notarization for any property transfer to be valid. Without it, Mr. Slade's document is legally void." The courtroom froze, heads turned, eyes wide as she stood there, poised and unapologetic, her words sharp as a blade. Grayson's face twisted, his pale cheeks flushing red. "Who are you?" he barked, leaning forward, his gavel hovering like a weapon. "This isn't a free-for-all. Are you an attorney in this case?" Naomi met his glare, her expression calm, her voice steady. "No, Your Honor. I'm an observer with a question about procedure," the gallery murmured, a mix of shock and curiosity rippling through the sparse crowd of lawyers, clerks, and onlookers. Grayson's eyes narrowed, his lips curling into a sneer. "An observer? Then sit down and keep your mouth shut, or I'll have you hauled out for disrupting my court." He pointed the gavel at her, his tone dripping with venom. "I don't need some uppity woman telling me how to run things." The word landed like a punch, and the gallery erupted in stifled gasps and low chuckles from a few white men in the back. Naomi's jaw tightened, but she didn't flinch. She could feel the weight of every stare, the judgment, the assumption that she was out of her depth. Slade smirked, leaning back further in his chair, while Jamal shot her a quick, grateful glance, before dropping his eyes. The Wilsons looked at her too, a flicker of hope in their weary faces, but Grayson wasn't done. "You think you can waltz in here and play lawyer?" he continued, his voice rising. "This is my courtroom, and I say who speaks. One more word, and you're in a cell. Understand?" Naomi held his gaze for a long moment, her heart pounding, her mind racing with the injustice unfolding before her. She sat slowly, deliberately, her pen poised over her notebook. But inside a fire roared. The trial rolled on, and Grayson's bias grew bolder. He peppered Slade with softball questions, nodding along as Apex's attorney spun a tale of the Wilsons' negligence, while cutting Jamal off mid-sentence whenever he tried to counter. "Enough grandstanding," Grayson snapped at one point when Jamal presented a tax receipt from 1999, proof of the Wilsons' diligence. "That's ancient history. Move on." By the time the gavel fell, the ruling was no surprise. "I find in favor of Apex Realty," Grayson declared, his voice smug. "The plaintiff's claim lacks merit. Case dismissed." Mrs. Wilson let out a choked sob, burying her face in her husband's shoulder, while Mr. Wilson stared at the floor, his fists balled in his lap. Slade shook hands with his team, his smirk now a full grin, and Grayson leaned back, satisfied, oblivious to the storm brewing in the gallery. Naomi closed her notebook, her pen leaving a faint dent in the page where she'd pressed too hard. She watched the Wilsons shuffle out, their shoulders hunched under the weight of defeat, their home stolen by a system that didn't care. She watched Slade pack his briefcase, his arrogance radiating like heat off asphalt. And she watched Grayson, his robe billowing as he retreated to his chambers, his authority unchallenged, or so he thought. The laughter from the gallery still echoed in her ears, the word uppity a splinter under her skin. She knew this courtroom, this judge, this city. She'd seen it all before, the way power flexed against people like her, like the Wilsons, bending rules and breaking lives. But this time was different. This time she wasn't just watching. She slipped her notebook into her bag, her mind already turning. Grayson thought he'd silenced her, shamed her into submission. He thought this was his victory, a footnote in his long, untouchable career. He was wrong. Naomi stood, smoothing her suit, her resolve hardening into something unbreakable. She wouldn't let this stand. Not today, not ever. She stepped into the hallway, the marble cool under her feet, and whispered to herself, "This isn't over, Judge. Not by a long shot." Her voice was soft, but it carried the weight of a vow, a promise that would echo far beyond these walls, a spark that would ignite a reckoning he couldn't imagine. Dr. Naomi Jackson sat at the scratched wooden desk in her modest Atlanta apartment, the glow of her laptop casting sharp shadows across her face. The Carson County Courthouse still lingered in her mind, Judge Harold Grayson's sneer and the Wilsons' defeat replaying like a bitter loop. She couldn't shake it, the way his gavel had fallen, sealing their fate, or the sting of his words branding her uppity in front of a chuckling gallery. Her navy suit hung neatly in the closet now, swapped for a grey hoodie and jeans, but her resolve burned hotter than ever. She opened a browser, her fingers flying across the keys as she drafted an anonymous complaint to the Georgia State Bar Association. "Judge Harold Grayson exhibits clear bias," she typed, her words precise, cutting. In the Wilson versus Apex Realty case, he dismissed valid evidence, overruled legitimate objections, and favored corporate interests without cause. She attached scanned copies of the Wilsons' deed and tax records, her evidence airtight, and hit send, her pulse quickening. Would this spark a ripple or drown in bureaucracy? Days later, whispers trickled through the legal grapevine. The bar had opened a preliminary review of Grayson's conduct, and the pressure was on. Naomi caught wind of it through a friend at the courthouse, a clerk who texted her late one night, "Grayson's on edge. Next case is a big one." That next case hit the docket fast. A black teenager named Malik Turner, 17, arrested on a flimsy trespassing charge in a white suburb. His public defender, a frazzled woman named Carla Ortiz, faced Grayson in courtroom 4C, the same marble-floored space where Naomi had been humiliated. She slipped into the gallery again, her notebook tucked under her arm, her presence quieter this time, blending into the small crowd of onlookers. What would Grayson do under this new spotlight? The trial unfolded with a tension thick enough to choke on. Carla argued Malik had been profiled, chased by cops for walking home from a gas station, his backpack mistaken for suspicious activity. She presented grainy body cam footage, Malik's voice pleading, "I live 2 streets over." Grayson sat stiffly, his usual smirk replaced by a tight-lipped frown. Was he feeling the heat? When the prosecutor, a wiry man named Paul Dennison, pushed a narrative of juvenile delinquency, Grayson cut him off mid-sentence. "Where's the evidence he intended harm?" the judge snapped, his tone sharp but measured. Naomi's pen paused mid-note, her breath catching. This wasn't the Grayson she knew. Dennison fumbled, offering only vague witness statements, and Grayson leaned back, rubbing his temples. "Case dismissed," he ruled, his gavel striking with a reluctant thud. Malik exhaled, his mother sobbing quietly beside him as they hugged. Naomi felt a flicker of triumph bloom in her chest, warm and fragile. Had her complaint actually worked? She watched Malik walk free, his lanky frame disappearing through the courthouse doors, a rare win against a system stacked against him. For a moment, she let herself believe it, the idea that Grayson might bend under scrutiny, that justice could peek through the cracks. She slipped out of the gallery, her steps lighter, her mind buzzing with possibility. Could this be the start of something bigger? Back at her apartment, she poured a glass of water, the cool liquid steadying her nerves. She replayed the trial in her head, Grayson's restraint, the way he'd questioned the prosecution instead of steamrolling Carla. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress, a tiny fracture in his armor. What if she kept pushing? That hope lasted exactly 12 hours. By midnight, her phone buzzed incessantly, notifications piling up like storm clouds. She opened her email, her stomach dropping as she read the subject line, "Troublemaker targets Judge Grayson." A link led to a blog called Southern Truth, a cesspool of racist rants run by some anonymous coward with a knack for venom. Dr. Naomi Jackson, a black agitator with a law degree, filed a baseless complaint against Honorable Judge Harold Grayson. The post read, her name bolded, her university photo plastered beside it. "This uppity radical wants to ruin our courts. Time to fight back." Her inbox flooded with hate mail within minutes, messages spilling over with slurs, threats, and promises to teach her a lesson. "Go back to where you came from," one read. "You'll regret this," snarled another. Naomi's hands shook as she scrolled, her brief victory curdling into dread. How had they found her? She hadn't signed the complaint, hadn't left a trace. Then it hit her, Grayson. He'd sniffed out the bar's investigation, pieced together her courtroom outburst, and struck back. He didn't need proof, just power, and he had enough to dig up her name and feed it to his dogs. She slammed her laptop shut, her breath ragged, her apartment suddenly feeling too small, too exposed. Who else was watching her now? She paced the hardwood floor, her shadow stretching long under the flickering bulb overhead. The win with Malik felt distant, a mirage swallowed by this new nightmare. Had she underestimated Grayson's reach? The next morning, she called the bar association, her voice low, urgent. "Someone leaked my identity. The complaint was anonymous. How did this happen?" The clerk on the line stammered, apologetic but useless. "We're looking into it, Dr. Jackson. Stay safe." Stay safe. She hung up, her jaw tight, her mind racing. Grayson hadn't just sat back and taken the hit. He'd turned her into a target, a scapegoat for his bruised ego. What kind of man wielded his gavel like a club, smashing lives to protect his pride? She glanced at her phone, the hate mail still pouring in, each message uglier than the last. "You think you can hide?" one taunted. "We know where you live," another promised. Naomi sank onto her couch, her hoodie damp with sweat, her triumph snuffed out by fear. She'd thought she could nudge the system, force Grayson to flinch, but he'd flipped the script, painting her as the villain. The Malik ruling wasn't a win, it was bait. A performance to dodge real accountability while he sharpened his knives. How far would he go to bury her? She pulled her notebook from her bag, flipping to the page where she'd scrawled Grayson's name, her pen digging into the paper as she circled it. This wasn't just about the Wilsons anymore, or Malik. It was personal. She'd rattled him and he'd roared back louder, meaner. What did he have planned next? Her eyes darted to the window, the blinds half open, the street below too quiet. She stood, closing them tight, her heart thudding against her ribs. The blog post had unleashed something she couldn't control, a wave of hate crashing over her life. Could she fight this alone? She thought of Malik's mother, her tears of relief, the Wilsons' bowed heads, and her own defiance in that courtroom. She'd started this, and Grayson wanted her to back down. She wouldn't. But as her phone buzzed again, another threat. Lighting up the screen, she wondered, had she just painted a bullseye on her back? Drop a comment with number 1 if you think Naomi's courage deserves respect, or number 2 if you'd tell her to run while she can. Smash that like button if you're rooting for her fight against Grayson's dirty tricks, and subscribe to catch every twist coming your way. Now, picture this. Naomi's name is out there. The hate is piling up, and Grayson's grinning somewhere, thinking he's won. What happens when the mob he's unleashed steps out from behind their screens and into her world? Stay tuned, because the storm's just beginning. Dr. Naomi Jackson stood at her apartment window, peering through the slats of her blinds as dusk settled over Atlanta. The city's skyline a jagged silhouette against an orange-streaked sky. Her phone lay silent on the coffee table, its screen dark after she'd muted the barrage of hate mail sparked by that venomous Southern Truth blog post. The words still echoed in her skull: troublemaker, uppity. Each slur a splinter digging deeper. She'd barely slept, her grey hoodie clinging to her sweat-damp skin, her mind replaying Judge Harold Grayson's smug face, his gavel, slamming down on the Wilsons' dreams, his sneer as he'd humiliated her in court. Now he'd turned her into a target, and the fallout was closing in. She stepped back, her bare feet cold against the hardwood, when a shout pierced the quiet. Outside. "Get out, you leech!" Her heart jolted. She crept back to the window, lifting a slat just enough to see. Below, on the cracked sidewalk outside her brick apartment building, a dozen figures gathered, their faces twisted with rage under the streetlights. White men mostly, some in trucker hats, others in faded jackets, clutching signs scrawled with hate. "No radicals here and leave our city." One waved a crowbar, its metal glinting as he paced. Naomi's breath caught as a brick sailed through the air, smashing her ground floor window with a deafening crash. Glass shards rained onto her floor, glittering like jagged teeth in the dim light. "We know you're in there," a voice bellowed, thick with a southern drawl. "Come face us, coward." She stumbled back, her pulse hammering, her notebook tumbling from the couch where she'd left it. The mob grew louder, chants rising into a chaotic roar. "Justice for Grayson!" they screamed, as if he were the victim, not the Wilsons, not Malik, not her. Naomi grabbed her phone, dialing 911 with shaking fingers. "There's a mob outside my home," she said, her voice low, urgent. "They're throwing bricks, threatening me. Please send help." The dispatcher, a woman with a bored tone, asked for her address, then paused. "Carson County PD's tied up tonight," she said, dismissive. "It's just a protest. Stay inside." The line clicked dead. Naomi stared at the phone. Disbelief, burning into anger. Tied up or unwilling? She knew Grayson's allies ran deep, cops included, and this was their way of letting her drown. Another brick crashed through, this one shattering a framed photo of her law school graduation. Her younger self smiling in a cap and gown. The mob's shouts turned vicious, slurs she wouldn't repeat slicing through the night. She snatched her bag, stuffing her laptop and notebook inside, her mind racing. She couldn't stay here, not with them closing in. Had Grayson orchestrated this directly or just lit the match? She bolted for the back door, slipping into the alley behind her building, the air humid and heavy with the scent of garbage. Her sneakers crunched on gravel as she darted toward the street, her hoodie pulled tight over her head. She flagged a cab 2 blocks away, her breath ragged as she slid into the back seat. "Downtown, quick," she told the driver, a gray-haired man who nodded without a word. The cab sped off and Naomi exhaled, her hands trembling in her lap. She checked into a cheap hotel off Peachtree Street, a squat concrete box with flickering neon signs, using cash to keep her name off the books. In her room, she locked the door, sank onto the sagging mattress, and opened her laptop. She needed leverage, something to fight back. Digging through public records, she found it. Grayson's name on a golf club membership list, alongside Apex Realty's CEO, Richard Holt. Photos from a charity event showed them laughing together, Grayson's. Arm slung around Holt's shoulder, her jaw tightened. This wasn't just bias, it was a racket. She saved the files, her mind spinning with plans. Could this expose them both? For a moment, she felt a spark of control, a weapon forming in her hands. She leaned back against the headboard, her bruised confidence flickering back to life. If she could tie Grayson to Apex, she might turn the tide, prove his rulings were bought. She closed her laptop, exhaustion pulling at her, and let herself believe she'd found safety, a chance to regroup. That illusion shattered at 3 in the morning when her hotel room phone rang, shrill and insistent. She answered, wary. "Dr. Jackson," a raspy voice sneered, "you can't hide." The line went dead. Her stomach dropped. How had they found her? She sprang up, peering out the window into the parking lot below. 3 men stood by her cab, its tires slashed, rubber sagging into the asphalt. Red spray paint streaked across its hood. "Go back." Her throat tightened as one of them looked up, his face shadowed but his intent clear. He pointed at her window, a slow, deliberate gesture, then hefted a bat. The others laughed, their voices carrying through the glass. "You're done, lady," one shouted. Naomi grabbed her bag, her heart pounding as she realized the mob hadn't just followed her. They'd hunted her. Grayson's reach was longer, darker than she'd imagined. Was he whispering orders, or had his hate simply spawned this beast? She slipped out the side exit, avoiding the lobby where a bored clerk might sell her out. The night air hit her like a slap, thick with humidity, and the distant wail of sirens that wouldn't come for her. She ran, her sneakers slapping wet pavement, ducking into a 24-hour diner 3 blocks away. Inside, she sank into a booth, her hoodie soaked with sweat, her laptop clutched to her chest. The waitress, a tired woman with dyed blonde hair, slid a coffee across the table without asking. Naomi nodded thanks, her hands wrapping around the mug, its heat grounding her. She opened her laptop again, staring at the photo of Grayson and Holt. She'd thought exposing their golf course friendship could shift the game, maybe even force a new trial for the Wilsons. That hope felt naive now, laughable. The mob wasn't a random flare-up, it was a message, Grayson's way of saying he'd crush her before she could strike. She sipped the coffee, bitter and scalding, her mind churning. She'd escaped her apartment, outrun the bricks, found a thread connecting. Grayson to Apex, she'd thought it was leverage, a lifeline. But as she glanced out the diner's streaked window, The parking lot lights glinting off a pickup truck idling across the street. She knew she'd miscalculated. The truck's driver stared at her, his face obscured, then revved the engine, peeling off into the night. Her win was a death sentence. A red flag waved in front of a bull that wouldn't stop charging. Naomi set the mug down, her hands steady despite the fear clawing her insides. She'd rattled Grayson, and he'd unleashed a storm. The golf. Club lead was solid, but it wasn't enough, not yet. She needed more, something to bury him, not just sting him. Her apartment was gone, her name a lightning rod for hate, her safety a memory. She thought of Malik's freedom, the Wilsons' tears, her own voice in that courtroom silenced but not snuffed out. She'd survived tonight, barely, but survival wasn't victory. Grayson's allies, the cops who ignored her, the mob that hunted her, they all smelled blood. How much worse could this get? She pulled her hoodie tighter, her eyes scanning the diner for threats. An old man hunched over a plate of eggs, a trucker scrolling his phone, the waitress wiping the counter. No one seemed to notice her, but she couldn't trust appearances anymore. She opened her notebook, flipping to a blank page, and wrote 2 words: Grayson's next. She didn't know what he'd throw at her, but she knew it was coming, bigger, meaner, more ruthless than bricks and bats. She dodged the mob, clung to her evidence, kept her fire alive. But as the diner's clock ticked past 4, its rhythmic tick a mocking countdown, she wondered. Had she just delayed the inevitable? Dr. Naomi Jackson slumped in the diner booth, the bitter coffee long gone cold. Her laptop screen glowing faintly in the pre-dawn gloom. The clock above the counter read 4:30, its neon hands mocking her sleepless night. Her hoodie clung to her skin, damp from the humid Atlanta air she'd run through, dodging the mob that had smashed her apartment windows and slashed her cab's tires. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, the photo of Judge Harold Grayson golfing with Apex Realty's CEO Richard Holt, staring back at her. It was a thread, a lifeline to tie Grayson's bias to cold, hard corruption. But the pickup truck peeling out of the parking lot had shaken her, a reminder that Grayson's wrath wasn't just words or bricks anymore. It was a hunt. She needed help, someone in the fight with her. She thought of Jamal Evans, the Wilsons' lawyer from that first courtroom. Clash? Young, scrappy, outgunned by Grayson's gavel and Victor Slade's smirk, but he'd had fire in him. She'd seen it when he'd pushed back, even as Grayson cut him down. Naomi pulled out her phone, her thumbs tapping out a quick email. Jamal, it's Naomi Jackson. I've got evidence linking Grayson to Apex. We can sue them, reopen the Wilsons case. Meet me at the diner on Peachtree, 5 this morning. She hit send, her pulse ticking up. Could Jamal be the ally she needed? She waited, the diner's hum of clinking plates and low chatter filling the silence, until her phone buzzed at 4:50. On my way, Jamal replied. She exhaled, a flicker of relief warming her chest. He arrived 10 minutes later, his wiry frame hunched in a wrinkled blazer, his eyes bloodshot but sharp. He slid into the booth across from her, glancing around the near-empty diner before speaking. You're the one from the gallery, right? The uppity woman Grayson chewed. Out. His voice was low, cautious, but a faint smile tugged at his lips. Naomi nodded, sliding her laptop toward him. That's me. Look at this. She opened the photo, then a spreadsheet she dug up, Apex donations funneled through a shell, company to Grayson's old campaign fund. Jamal's eyebrows shot up, his fingers tracing the screen. This is big, he muttered. If we can prove this, we've got a civil suit against Apex, maybe even Grayson. The Wilsons could get their home back. Naomi leaned forward, her voice steady despite the exhaustion gnawing at her. I've got more, public records, emails, but I can't do this alone. The mob's after me, Grayson's people. I need someone to file this, push it through. Jamal rubbed his jaw, nodding slowly. I'm in. Let's draft it today, get a hearing set. Apex won't know what hit them. She felt a surge of hope, fragile but real. Had she finally found a partner to tilt the scales? They spent the next hour hunched over her laptop, sketching a lawsuit. Apex Realty vs. Wilson, round 2, with Grayson's corruption as the hammer. By 6, they had a plan, a hearing date request emailed to the clerk. Jamal shook her hand, his grip firm. "We've got this, Naomi. I'll see you tomorrow." She left the diner as dawn broke, the sky bruising purple over the city. She checked into a new hotel, a dingy spot near the interstate, her cash dwindling, but her spirits lifting. Jamal's confidence stuck with her, his promise to fight echoing in her ears. She slept for the first time in days, dreaming of Grayson's face twisting as the Wilsons walked back into their home. The hearing date came through that afternoon, set for next week. She met Jamal at a coffee shop near the courthouse, her bruises, from the mob's chase hidden under a long-sleeve shirt, her eyes bright with purpose. "We're ready," he said, handing her a printed motion, his voice buzzing with energy. This could change everything. She believed him. Why wouldn't she? That belief shattered at midnight. Naomi was in her hotel room, reviewing the lawsuit draft when her phone rang, an unknown number. She answered, wary. "Dr. Jackson," a gravelly voice sneered. "We're outside." Her stomach dropped. She rushed to the window, peeling back. The curtain. In the parking lot, 3 men loomed, their faces shadowed under hoods, one hefting a tire iron. Her heart slammed against her ribs as they started toward the building. She grabbed her bag, bolting for the door, but it was too late. The men burst through the lobby stairwell just as she hit the hallway, their boots thudding on the carpet. "There she is!" one shouted, his voice thick with glee. She ran, desperation, fueling her, but they were faster, cornering her near the vending machines. The first blow landed on her shoulder, a sickening crack as the tire iron swung. She stumbled, pain exploding down her arm, and threw herself against the wall, clawing for escape. The second man grabbed her hair, yanking her back, his fist slamming into her ribs. "This is for Grayson," he hissed, his breath hot on her face. The third kicked her legs out, sending her crashing to the floor, her laptop skidding across the carpet. She curled into a ball, shielding her head as blows rained down, each strike a thunderclap of agony. Blood trickled from her nose, warm and metallic, her vision blurring. She heard shouts, a distant siren, and then nothing, the men vanishing. As quickly as they'd come, Naomi woke to fluorescent lights, a hospital bed creaking under her. Her left arm was in a sling, her ribs taped, her face a map of bruises. A nurse hovered, her voice soft. "You're lucky someone called it in. Cops are outside." Naomi nodded, pain spiking with every breath. The cops took her statement. Their questions clipped, their eyes cold. "No ID on the attackers," one said, shrugging. "Probably random." She knew better. This wasn't random. It was revenge. But how had they found her? She replayed the night, the call, the ambush, and then it hit her, a knife in the gut. Jamal. He'd known her hotel, the only one she'd told. She dug through her bag, wincing as she pulled out her phone. A text from Jamal, sent hours before the attack. "Sorry, Naomi, they got to me." Her blood ran cold. He'd sold her out, traded her safety for what? Cash? Threats? She called him, her voice hoarse. "Why, Jamal?" He answered, his tone shaky. "Grayson's people cornered me, offered 10 grand to walk away. When I said no, they showed me photos of my kid at school. I had to give them something." He hung up, leaving her with silence and betrayal. Her trust, her ally, her plan all crumbled. Grayson hadn't just sent thugs, he turned her own side against her. Naomi sank back against the pillows, her body screaming, her mind reeling. She'd thought Jamal was her shot, her way to hit Apex and Grayson where it hurt. They'd had a hearing date, evidence, a fight worth winning. Now she was battered, alone, her location compromised by the one person she'd leaned on. Grayson's shadow loomed larger, his retaliation sharper, slicing through her defenses. She stared at the ceiling, the antiseptic smell stinging her nose, and clenched her fists despite the pain. He thought this would break her. He was wrong. But as the hospital's hum filled the quiet, she wondered, who could she trust now? Drop. A comment with number 1, if you think Naomi should have seen Jamal's betrayal coming. Or number 2, if you'd have trusted him too in her shoes. Hit that like button if you're furious at Grayson's dirty game, and subscribe to see how Naomi fights back from this brutal blow. Picture her in that hospital bed, bruised but unbroken, with Grayson's thugs still out there. What happens? when she takes her next swing against a system that keeps punching down. Stick around, the fire's just getting started. Dr. Naomi Jackson lay in the hospital bed, the sterile white walls of Grady Memorial pressing in around her like a cage. Her left arm ached in its sling, her ribs throbbed beneath the tight bandages, and the bruises on her face pulsed with every heartbeat. The beating from Apex Realty's hired thug still echoed in her bones, Jamal Evans' betrayal a fresh wound in her mind. She stared at the ceiling, the hum of machines a constant drone, her phone clutched in her good hand. His text, "Sorry, Naomi. They got to me," burned behind her eyes. She'd trusted him, built a lawsuit with him, only for him to sell her out to Grayson's goons. Blood crusted her split lip as she clenched her jaw, fury rising over the pain. She wasn't done. Not yet. Her laptop sat on the bedside table, dented but intact from the attack. She reached for it, wincing as her ribs protested, and opened the files she'd gathered. Grayson's golf club ties to Richard Holt, Apex's CEO, the campaign donations funneled through a shell company. It was enough to sting, but she needed more, a blow to crack their armor wide open. She couldn't go back. To her apartment, couldn't trust the courts, couldn't even walk Atlanta's streets without looking over her shoulder, but she could still fight. She scrolled through her contacts, landing on an old law school friend, Tanya Brooks, now a producer at a local news station. "Tanya," she typed, her fingers stiff but determined, "I've got dirt on Judge Grayson and Apex Realty. Can you get me airtime?" The reply came fast. "City Council meeting tonight, live on Channel 7. Crash it. I'll make sure the cameras roll." Naomi's pulse quickened. A public stage, unfiltered, raw. She checked out of the hospital against the doctor's advice, her arm still slung, her face a patchwork of purple and yellow. She pulled a black blazer over her hoodie, the fabric straining against her bandages, and took a cab to City Hall, the squat brick building buzzing with evening traffic. Inside, the council chamber was packed, rows of folding chairs filled with residents, reporters, and suited officials. The mayor droned on about budget cuts, his voice a dull hum, while Naomi slipped into the back, her heart pounding. She caught Tanya's eye across the room, a quick nod signaling the plan was set. When the floor opened for public comments, Naomi stood, ignoring the ache in her ribs as she limped to the podium. The mic squeaked as she adjusted it, her voice hoarse but steady. "My name is Dr. Naomi Jackson. I'm here to expose Judge Harold Grayson and Apex Realty." The room snapped to attention, murmurs rippling through the crowd. Cameras swiveled, their red lights blinking alive. Grayson's been rigging cases for Apex, taking their money under the table. "I've got proof, photos, records, a trail of corruption that stole the Wilsons' home and countless others." She held up her phone, the golf club photo blown. Up on the screen behind her, Grayson's smug grin beside Holt's. "This isn't justice, it's a racket." The chamber erupted, gasps and shouts colliding as council members squirmed in their seats. Naomi kept going, her voice rising. "They sent a mob to my home, beat me bloody when I fought back. This is what they do to silence us." She pulled back her sleeve, revealing the sling, the bruises climbing her arm like a twisted vine. The crowd roared, some clapping, others yelling in outrage. Reporters scribbled furiously. Tanya's camera crew zooming in tight, Naomi's eyes locked on the lens, her words a blade. "Grayson thinks he's untouchable. He's wrong." She stepped back, her legs trembling but her spirit soaring. The broadcast hit the airwaves like a bomb. By morning, Apex's stock dipped 5 points. Investors spooked by the viral clip of Naomi's bruised face and damning evidence. Protesters gathered outside the courthouse, signs reading, "Justice for Naomi" and "Grayson out." She watched it unfold from her new hotel room, a step up from the last. Its clean sheets a small comfort against her aching body. Channel 7 replayed her speech on loop, pundits debating Grayson's fate. She felt a rush, a real triumph this time, not the fleeting flicker of Malik's release or Jamal's false promises. Had she finally turned the tide? Grayson stormed out of his chambers that afternoon, his robe flapping as he shoved past reporters, clamoring at the courthouse steps. "Lies," he bellowed, his face red, his voice cracking. "That woman's a fraud." but the damage was done. His name trending online, hashtags like #Grayson corrupt lighting up screens across Georgia. Naomi leaned back on her hotel bed, a faint smile tugging at her swollen lip. She'd hit him where it hurt, in the open, where he couldn't hide. She flipped through news sites, her chest swelling with something close to victory. Could this be the moment he broke? That hope lasted until dusk. She'd just ordered takeout, her stomach growling after days of hospital mush, when her phone buzzed with an alert. Breaking news, Dr. Naomi Jackson arrested. Her blood froze. She clicked the link, a live feed loading on her screen. Squad. Cars lined the hotel parking lot, lights flashing red and blue through her window blinds. The anchor's voice cut through. Jackson faces charges of tax evasion, stemming from an IRS investigation launched this morning. Naomi's breath hitched as boots thumped outside her door. She barely had time to stand before it burst open, 4 agents in dark jackets storming in, badges gleaming. "Naomi Jackson, you're under arrest," one barked, his hand on his holster. She raised her good arm, stunned as they cuffed her wrists, the metal biting into her bruised skin. "This is a mistake," she said, her voice shaking. "I've paid every tax every year." The lead agent, a stocky man with a buzz cut, smirked. "Tell it to the judge." They hauled her out, cameras flashing as reporters swarmed the lot. She stumbled, her sling catching on the doorframe, pain shooting through her shoulder. The live feed caught it all, her grim face plastered across screens, the headline twisting her triumph into disgrace. Whistleblower or criminal? She glimpsed Grayson on a TV in the lobby as they dragged her past, his lips curled in a faint victorious grin. The precinct was a blur, fingerprint ink staining her hands, her mugshot snapped under harsh lights. She sat in a holding cell, the concrete, bench cold against her thighs, her mind racing. Tax evasion. She'd filed meticulously, her accountant a stickler for detail. This wasn't a fluke. It was a setup. Grayson's allies in the mayor's office pulling strings to bury her. The broadcast had humiliated him, shaken Apex, but they'd hit back harder, flipping her public win into a public fall. She pressed, her forehead against the bars, her breath shallow, her ribs screaming with every move. A guard slid a phone through the slot, her one call. She dialed Tanya, her voice low. "They framed me. IRS, tax charges. It's Grayson." Tanya cursed softly. "I'll dig into it, Naomi, hang tight." The call ended, leaving her alone with the cell's damp silence. She'd thought the council speech was her breakthrough, a crack in Grayson's fortress. The crowd's cheers, Apex's wobble, the protests, they'd felt like power. Now she was cuffed, her name smeared, her fight snuffed out on live TV. Grayson hadn't just weathered her strike, he'd turned it against her, his reach snaking into the IRS, the police, the headlines. She sank back, her good hand tracing the bruises on her face. She'd exposed him, made him bleed, but he'd drawn more blood in return. The hotel raid, the cuffs, the cameras, it was theater, his way of showing the city who still ruled. She thought of the Wilsons, homeless now, Malik's fragile freedom, her own shattered trust in Jamal. She'd pushed Grayson into the light, and he'd dragged her into a deeper dark. Her triumph was a mirage, a fleeting high before the crash. But as the cell's fluorescent buzz filled her ears, she straightened, her eyes narrowing. He'd caged her, but he hadn't killed her, not yet. Dr. Naomi Jackson sat on the icy concrete bench of the Atlanta holding cell, the cuffs from her arrest still chafing her wrists, her left arm throbbing in its sling beneath the jail's scratchy orange jumpsuit. The fluorescent lights buzzed. Overhead, casting stark shadows across her bruised face, a roadmap of Apex Realty's brutality and Jamal's betrayal. Her public triumph at the city council meeting, exposing Judge Harold Grayson's corruption on live TV, had crumbled into this: a trumped-up tax evasion charge, a staged arrest broadcast to millions, Grayson's smirk flickering on the precinct, TV as she'd been dragged in. She leaned against the bars, her ribs screaming with each shallow breath, her mind racing. This wasn't justice, it was a trap, and Grayson's allies had sprung it tight. The cell stank of sweat and bleach, its walls scarred with scratched names and dates. She wasn't alone. 3 other women shared the space, their eyes wary, but curious. A wiry 20-something with cropped hair, Tasha, paced near the door, muttering about a busted taillight stop. An older woman, Miss Lorraine, sat knitting an invisible scarf, her grey braids swaying as she hummed gospel. A teenage girl, Kia, slumped in the corner, her hoodie pulled low, silent since Naomi arrived. They'd seen her mugshot on the news, whispered her name when the guards weren't looking. "You're the one who called out that judge," Tasha said, stopping mid-step. Naomi nodded, her voice raspy. "Yeah. Didn't expect to end up here." Hours dragged into a full day, her bail hearing delayed with no explanation. She demanded her paperwork from a guard, a burly man with a buzz cut and a permanent sneer, but he shrugged. "Lost it," he said, his tone dripping with mock pity. "Happens sometimes." Naomi's jaw tightened. Lost it? She knew better. Grayson's influence snaked through the precinct, his cronies stalling to keep her locked up. She turned to Tasha, lowering her voice. "This isn't an accident. They're burying me." Tasha smirked, bitter. "Welcome to the club, cops. Here don't care unless you're white or rich." Could Naomi rally these women, turn their shared outrage into something more? By day 2, frustration boiled over. Naomi stood, wincing as her ribs protested, and banged on the bars. "We've got rights. Where's my bail hearing?" The guard glared, unmoved, but Tasha joined her, slamming her fist against the metal. "Yeah, and where's my lawyer? Been here 3 days." Miss Lorraine rose, her voice soft but firm. "I ain't seen a judge neither." Kia peeked from her hood, her eyes wide, then stood kicking the bench. "This is bullshit!" The cell erupted in shouts, their voices echoing down the corridor. Guards stormed in, batons raised, but Naomi held her ground, her sling a defiant banner. "You can't silence us!" The commotion drew a crowd, inmates in nearby cells banging trays, chanting for release. A janitor slipped past, whispering to a sympathetic guard who muttered into his radio. Hours later, a news van rolled up outside, Channel 7's logo, bright against the grey precinct walls. Tanya Brooks had delivered, her cameras catching the uproar live. "Protesters inside Atlanta PD demand justice for Dr. Naomi Jackson," the anchor reported. Her voice crisp over the feed Naomi glimpsed through a barred window. The guard's sneer faltered as his supervisor barked orders. By nightfall, a judge, pressured by the spotlight, ordered her release on bond. Naomi walked out, her jumpsuit swapped for her blazer, her head high despite the limp. She stepped into the muggy night, the precinct's floodlights harsh on her bruised face, reporters shouting questions she ignored. Tanya met her at the curb, her sleek bob glinting under streetlights. "You okay?" she asked, her eyes scanning Naomi's injuries. "Better now," Naomi said, her voice steady. "Thanks for the push." She felt a rush, freedom tasting sweeter than ever. The prison stunt had backfired, Grayson's grip slipping under public glare. She hailed a cab, her mind buzzing with next steps. Could this momentum bury him for good? She settled into the back seat, her good hand clutching her bag, the city's neon blur streaking past. She'd beaten the cell, turned their trap into her stage. That illusion shattered before the cab reached her hotel. She'd parked her rental car, a beat-up sedan borrowed from Tanya, 2 blocks from the precinct during the chaos of her release. As she paid the driver and stepped out, headlights flared. Behind her, 3 squad cars screeched to a halt, officers spilling out, guns drawn. "Naomi Jackson, hands up," one shouted, his voice a guttural bark. She froze, her sling dangling, her heart sinking. "What now?" she demanded, her voice cracking. The lead cop, a lanky man with a scarred cheek, smirked. "Felony possession. Found drugs in your car." He held up a baggie, white powder glinting under the streetlights. Her stomach plummeted. "That's not mine," she yelled, but they swarmed her, slamming her against the hood, her ribs flaring with fresh agony. The cuffs snapped on again, tighter this time, digging into her bruised wrists. "Tell it to the judge," the cop sneered, shoving her into the squad car. She caught a glimpse of her rental, its door ajar, a planted lie now her noose. Grayson's allies had struck again, faster, meaner, turning her release into a deeper cage. The precinct loomed as they drove back, its brick facade a mocking grin. She'd rallied the inmates, forced her freedom, only to be snared by a frame-up. So blatant it screamed desperation. Booked again, she sat in a new cell, this one colder, emptier, the air thick with mildew. No Tasha, no Lorraine, just silence and the weight of felony charges. The guard from before, the sneering one, lingered outside, twirling his baton. "Grayson says hi," he muttered, low enough to deny later. Naomi's blood ran cold, then hot, fury surging past the fear. He'd planted the drugs, used his precinct puppets to crush her brief win. She'd walked out a hero, the news singing her name, and now she was a felon, her reputation torched. The bail hearing was set for morning, but she knew it wouldn't come. Not with Grayson's fingers on the scales. She curled her good hand into a fist, her nails biting her palm. The protest had shaken him, forced her release, but he'd countered with a sledgehammer, framing her as a drug runner. She thought of the baggie, the cops' smirks, the guards' taunt. This wasn't just retaliation, it was annihilation. A message to anyone watching: defy Grayson and he'd bury you deeper than dirt. Her ribs ached, her arm burned, but her mind sharpened, cutting through the haze. She'd escaped once, turned his trap into triumph. Could she do it again? The cell's silence pressed in, broken only by the guard's retreating footsteps. She leaned back, her head against the damp wall, her eyes tracing cracks in the concrete. The news vans wouldn't save her this time, not with felon stamped on her name. Grayson had flipped her victory into a nightmare, his power flexing, like a storm cloud over Atlanta. She'd thought freedom was hers, a step toward toppling him. Now she was back in chains, the drugs a lie she couldn't disprove. Not yet. But as the night stretched on, her resolve hardened, a steel core beneath. The bruises. He'd caged her again, but cages could break. Drop a comment with number 1 if you think Naomi's prison protest was worth the risk, or number 2 if she should have stayed quiet to avoid this frame-up. Smash that like button if you're raging at Grayson's slimy tactics, and subscribe to see how Naomi claws out of this mess. Imagine her in that cell, bruised but defiant, with Grayson's dirty hands all over her fate. What happens when the system doubles down and she's got nothing left to lose? Keep watching, the battle's heating up. Dr. Naomi Jackson sat in the defendant's chair of courtroom 4C, the same marble-floored space where she'd first clashed with Judge Harold Grayson. Her orange jumpsuit scratched her skin, her left arm still in its sling, her face a swollen tapestry of bruises from Apex Realty's thugs. The felony drug possession charge hung over her like a guillotine, planted by Grayson's allies after her brief release from jail. The air buzzed with tension, the gallery packed with reporters, protesters, and gawkers, their whispers a low hum beneath the fluorescent lights. She glanced up at the bench, and there he was, Grayson, his black robe crisp, his gray hair slicked back, his pale eyes glinting with malice. Of all the judges in Carson County, fate had dealt her this, him presiding over her ruin. The bail hearing began, the prosecutor, Paul Dennison, striding forward with a predator's grin. "Your Honor," he said, his voice oily, "Dr. Naomi Jackson was found with 20 grams of cocaine in her vehicle, a clear intent to distribute. She's a flight risk, a danger to the community. We request bail be denied." He slid a photo of the baggie across the table, the white powder stark against black plastic. Naomi's stomach twisted, her good hand clenching the chair's edge. She had no lawyer, her public defender delayed by scheduling issues, another of Grayson's tricks. She stood, her voice raw but firm. "That's a lie. Those drugs were planted. I demand a chain of custody audit." Grayson's lips curled, a sneer breaking through his judicial mask. "You're not in a position to demand anything, Ms. Jackson. Sit down or I'll add contempt to your list," the gallery murmured, pencils scratching on pads. He leaned forward, his tone dripping. "Venom. I've seen your type before, thug in a suit, stirring trouble then crying victim. Bail's denied, you'll rot in lockup until trial." The gavel slammed, a crack that echoed off the high ceiling, sealing her fate. Naomi's knees buckled, but she stayed upright, her eyes locked on his, defiance burning through the fear. He thought he'd won. His courtroom, his kingdom again. She sank back into her seat, the jumpsuit's rough fabric chafing her bruises, her mind racing. Rot in lockup? He'd rigged this, turned her protest-fueled release into a deeper pit. The guards hauled her out, their grips tight on her arms. But as they passed the bench, a bailiff, a stocky man with kind eyes, slipped a folder into her bag. "Keep it quiet," he whispered, barely audible over the courtroom's din. Back in her cell, a dank cube with a flickering bulb. She opened it, her breath catching. Pages of Grayson's old rulings spilled out, dozens from the past decade, each stamped with bias. Black tenants evicted, white landlords favored, Apex Realty winning case after case. Her pulse surged. This was gold, proof of his corruption spanning years. She needed to get it out. The cell's isolation gnawed at her, but she spotted a guard, a young woman with a bored slouch scrolling her phone. "Hey," Naomi called, her voice low. "I've got something big. Pass it to Channel 7, Tanya Brooks. You'll be a hero." The guard hesitated, then smirked. "What's in it for me?" Naomi slid a crumpled 20 through the bars, her last cash. "More when I'm out." The guard pocketed it, took the folder and sauntered off. Naomi sat back, her ribs aching, hope flickering. Had she just lit a match in the dark? By morning, the story broke. Grayson's decade of bias exposed. Channel 7 blared. Tanya's voice crisp over footage of the leaked files. Protests erupted outside the courthouse. A sea of signs and chants, "Justice now," and "Grayson resign." Naomi caught snippets on a guard's radio, her lips twitching into a faint smile despite the pain. The gallery had seen her cuffed, but now the world saw Grayson's dirt. Reporters swarmed his chambers, his face flushed as he dodged questions. Inside her cell she paced, her sling swinging, her mind buzzing. She'd struck deep, turned his courtroom into her weapon. Could this force his hand? Grayson reconvened the hearing that afternoon, his scowl deeper, his robe wrinkled from the chaos. The gallery swelled, standing room only, the air thick with anticipation. "Order!" he barked, his gavel pounding, but his voice trembled, a crack in his armor. Dennison rose, flustered, his argument thinner. The defendant's smear campaign changes nothing. She's still a felon. Naomi stood again, her voice cutting through. "Your Honor, those files show you've buried black. Plaintiffs for years. This case is tainted by your bias. Recuse yourself." The crowd gasped, a ripple of shock spreading. Grayson's face purpled, his fist slamming the bench. "You're out of line. Sit down." She didn't. "Rule 42, judicial misconduct voids impartiality. You're compromised." Her words landed like blows, the gallery erupting in cheers and boos. Grayson's eyes darted, sweat beading on his brow. He banged the gavel, frantic. "Recess, clear the room." Guards rushed her back to the cell, but the damage was done. The protest grew louder, fists pounding the courthouse doors, the leaked files trending online. Naomi sat on her bunk, her heart racing, a fierce grin breaking through her bruised lips. She'd turned his stage into hers, flipped his trap into chaos. Was this the crack that would shatter him? That night, the cell door creaked open, a different guard looming, his baton tapping his palm. "Visitor," he grunted, leading her to a dim hallway. She expected Tanya, maybe a lawyer, but the guard shoved her into a storage room, the door slamming shut. 3 inmates emerged from the shadows, their eyes hard, knuckles scarred. "Grayson's orders," one growled, cracking his neck. Naomi's stomach dropped, her sling a useless shield as they closed in. The first punch hit her jaw, snapping her head back, blood flooding her mouth. She swung her good arm, landing. A weak hit, but they swarmed, fists and boots crashing into her ribs, her legs, her skull. She crumpled, pain exploding white hot, her vision swimming. "Tell him I'm done," she gasped, a lie to buy time, but they laughed, kicking harder. "He says you're a lesson," the leader snarled, stomping her knee. Her scream echoed, cut short as a fist slammed her temple, darkness rushing in. She woke in the infirmary, strapped to a bed, her body a throbbing wreck, her left leg splintered, her face swollen shut on one side. A nurse whispered, "They found you just in time." But Naomi barely heard, her mind fogged with agony. The guard's words rang. Grayson's orders. Her courtroom showdown had lit a fire, shaken his throne, but he'd struck back, savage and swift, turning inmates into his fists. She'd leaked the files, rallied the streets, thought she'd won. Around only for him to nearly kill her in a locked room. The infirmary's antiseptic sting burned her nose, her breath shallow through cracked ribs. He'd silenced her voice, broken her body but not her will. She stared at the ceiling, a single tear cutting through the blood on her cheek. He'd caged her, framed her, beaten her, but she was still breathing. How much more could she take? The infirmary door creaked, a shadow passing, a guard muttering into a radio. She tensed, every muscle screaming, expecting another blow. It didn't come, not yet, but she knew Grayson wasn't done. The protests outside roared on, a distant thunder. Through the walls, her name a rallying cry he couldn't quiet. She'd turned his courtroom into a battlefield, forced his hand, but he'd drawn blood in return, a brutal reminder of his reach. Her victory was a ghost, slipping through her fingers as she lay there, shattered but alive. She clenched her good fist, her nails digging in, a vow forming in the haze he'd pay even if it killed her. Dr. Naomi Jackson lay strapped to the infirmary bed in Atlanta's county jail, her body a throbbing wreck after Judge Harold Grayson's inmates had beaten her within an inch of her life. Her left leg ached in its splint, her ribs cracked beneath. Fresh bandages, her swollen face barely recognizable under the purple bloom of bruises. The courtroom showdown had been her spark, leaking Grayson's biased rulings to ignite protests, but he doused it with blood, his orders turning her cell into a slaughterhouse. The infirmary's antiseptic stink burned her nose, the hum of a heart monitor her only company, as she stared at the cracked ceiling, pain pulsing with every shallow breath. She thought she'd shaken him, forced his hand, only to wake up. Here broken but breathing, her fire flickering but alive. Word of the attack spread fast. By morning, Channel 7's cameras swarmed the jail's gates, Tanya Brooks' voice cutting through the chaos. Dr. Naomi Jackson, battered in custody, fights for justice against Judge Grayson. The story went viral, hashtags like Shout Naomi Strong, and Grayson must go trending nationwide. Protesters swelled outside the courthouse, their chants a dull roar through the infirmary walls, signs demanding Grayson's removal piercing the humid Atlanta air. Naomi caught glimpses on a nurse's phone, her cracked lips twitching into a faint smile despite the agony. The nation was watching now, her name a rallying cry he couldn't silence. Had she finally tipped the scales? A federal probe launched. That afternoon, the Department of Justice announcing an investigation into Grayson's conduct, citing credible allegations of judicial misconduct and prisoner abuse. Activists flooded social media, lawyers dissected her leaked files on cable news, and Apex Realty's stock plummeted 10 points as shareholders bailed. Naomi's chest swelled, a fragile hope blooming amid the pain. She'd turned his trap into a spotlight, her beating a megaphone for his corruption. She whispered to the nurse, her voice a croak, "Get me a phone." The woman, a soft-spoken brunette with tired eyes, hesitated, then slipped her a burner. Naomi dialed Tanya, her good, hand trembling. "They're coming for him," she rasped. "Keep it loud." Tanya chuckled, fierce. "Oh, it's loud, Naomi. You're a hero out there." She hung up, exhaustion tugging at her, but her mind raced. Grayson's empire was wobbling, the feds circling, the public raging. She'd thought the courtroom leak was big, but this was seismic, a national reckoning. Could it topple him for good? She shifted, wincing as her splint dug into her thigh, and let herself believe it, just for a moment, that justice might finally claw its way through the muck. The protests grew, chants of "Free Naomi" echoing into the night, a balm to her battered spirit. She closed her eyes, the monitor's beep steadying her, and dared to dream of Grayson in cuffs, his smug grin wiped clean. That dream shattered. At dawn, her phone buzzed with a news alert, the headline a punch to her gut. Jackson's private calls leaked, reverse racism alleged. She clicked, her breath hitching. Audio clips flooded the web, her voice distorted but unmistakable, ranting in old calls to Tanya. "White judges like Grayson rigged the game. They hate us, always will." The media spun it fast, pundits on every channel branding her a bigot, a hypocrite tearing down honest courts. "Is Naomi Jackson the real racist?" One anchor sneered, his smirk a mirror of Grayson's. Her stomach churned, bile rising as she scrolled. Someone had hacked her phone, twisted her pain into a weapon. The backlash hit like a tsunami. Protesters thinned outside, some dropping signs, others turning on her with tweets like, "She's no better than him." The federal probe stalled. A DOJ spokesperson dodging questions. "We're reviewing all evidence." Apex's stock ticked up, investors reassured by her fall. Naomi's good hand clenched the phone, her knuckles whitening, her bruised face flushing with rage. Grayson's allies hadn't just beaten her body, they'd gutted her name, flipped her triumph into a smear so vile it choked the air from her fight. How had they pulled this off so fast? She replayed the calls, late-night vents after the Wilsons. Lost her anger raw but private. Someone close had sold her out again. She called Tanya, her voice shaking. "Who got those recordings?" Tanya cursed, frantic. "I don't know, Naomi. My line's clean, I swear. They're pros, whoever did this." Naomi hung up, her mind spinning. Grayson's reach stretched, beyond jail guards and cops, into tech, into shadows she couldn't see. He turned her beating into his shield, her words into his sword. She tossed the phone aside, its cracked screen a taunt, and sank back, pain flaring as her splint shifted. The protests faded, the news pivoted, her hero's cape shredded by a lie she couldn't untwist. Had she pushed too far, given him too much to spin? By noon, a guard wheeled her back to court, her leg splinted, her face a mask of swelling. Grayson's chambers had called an emergency hearing, his latest move in this twisted chess game. The gallery was half empty now, the air stale with doubt, reporters scribbling with less fervor. He took the bench, his robe pristine, his sneer sharper than ever. "Ms. Jackson," he said, his voice smooth, "your antics have consequences. I'm suing you for defamation, $10 million for your baseless lies." Dennison stood, beside him smug as ever, filing papers thick with accusations, her leaks, her racist rants, her disruption of justice. Naomi's heart sank, her body screaming as she rose, leaning on the table. "You ordered my beating," she spat, her voice a growl. "This is retaliation, plain and simple." Grayson's eyes narrowed, his gavel poised. "Prove it, or sit down. Your little stunt's over." The gallery murmured, a few heads nodding his way, her allies dwindling. He banged the gavel, setting a trial date, his victory palpable. She slumped back, her good hand gripping the chair, her mind foggy with pain and fury. The national spotlight had crowned her, then crucified her. Grayson's counterstrike a masterstroke of cruelty. Back in the infirmary, she stared at the TV, muted clips of her arrest, her beating, her leaked calls cycling endlessly. The nurse slipped her a note from Tanya. "Feds are spooked. Public's turning. We're digging, but it's bad." Naomi crumpled it, her nails digging into her palm, blood seeping through fresh cuts. She'd gone viral, shaken the system, thought justice was near, only for Grayson to twist it all, painting her as the villain while he sued her into oblivion. Her leg throbbed, her ribs burned, her name trashed beyond repair. He'd taken her win and made it his weapon, his allies hacking her life to pieces. She lay there, the monitor's beep a mocking rhythm, her spirit battered but unbowed. The protests had faltered, the probe stalled, her freedom a distant memory. Grayson sat on his bench, smug and untouchable, while she rotted in bandages, facing millions he knew she couldn't pay. She'd thought the spotlight would save her, force accountability, but he'd turned it into a noose tightening with every headline. Her good eye, the one not swollen shut, fixed on the ceiling, a vow forming in the haze. He'd broken her body, smeared her soul, but she wasn't dead. Not yet. Drop a comment with number 1 if you think Naomi's beating should have rallied more support, or number 2 if her leaked calls crossed a line. Hit that like button if you're boiling at Grayson's ruthless comeback, and subscribe to catch Naomi's next move against this monster. Picture her strapped down, the nation flipping on her, Grayson grinning from his throne. What happens when she swings back from rock bottom, with the whole world watching? Stay locked in, the stakes are skyrocketing. Dr. Naomi Jackson sat in the infirmary bed, her body a wreck of bandages and splints. The Atlanta jail's sterile walls a prison within a prison. Her left leg throbbed under its cast. Her ribs ached with every breath, her face swollen from Grayson's inmate attack, now worsened by the weight of his defamation suit. The national spotlight had turned sour, her leaked calls branding her a racist. The federal probe stalled, protests fading into whispers. Judge Harold Grayson sued her for $10 million, a sum she couldn't fathom, his latest blow to crush her spirit while she lay broken. But as the TV droned muted headlines of her disgrace, her good hand clenched the sheets, her mind sharpening. Through the haze, she'd lost everything, home, name, freedom, but not her fight. Released from the infirmary on crutches, she limped into courtroom 4C for the defamation trial, her orange jumpsuit swapped for a borrowed grey suit, ill-fitting, over her sling and cast. The gallery was sparse, a handful of reporters and die-hard supporters dwarfed by empty seats, the air heavy with doubt. Grayson loomed on the bench, his robe pristine, his smirk a blade. Paul Dennison, the prosecutor turned plaintiff's counsel, stood smugly, his suit crisp as he laid out Grayson's case. Dr. Jackson's lies have slandered a respected judge, he declared, waving the leaked files and hacked calls. She's a fraud, a menace, and owes $10 million for the damage. Naomi's stomach twisted, but she rose, her crutches creaking, her voice steady. I'll defend myself. Grayson's eyes narrowed, his gavel twitching. Proceed, Miss Jackson, but watch your step. She nodded, her mind racing. She had no lawyer, no funds, but she had her brain, and that was enough. She hobbled to the stand, her cast thumping the floor, and faced Dennison. You claim defamation, she said, her tone cutting. But those files I leaked, they're public record, verified by the state. Truth isn't slander, the gallery murmured, a reporter scribbling fast. Dennison smirked, unfazed. Your intent was malicious, to ruin a career. Naomi leaned forward, pain flaring but ignored. My intent was justice. Ask him about Apex Realty's cash in his pocket. The room stilled, Grayson's face flushing. She pivoted, addressing him directly. Your Honor, I've got something you'll recognize. She pulled a USB drive from her pocket. A gift from Tanya slipped through a guard and handed it to the bailiff. Play it. Grayson banged his gavel, furious. This is irrelevant. But the bailiff, the same kind-eyed man from her drug, hearing, plugged it in, a crackling audio filling the court. Grayson's voice, smug and slurred from a bar years back, sneered. Black folks clog my docket begging for handouts. I clear 'em out for Holt, easy money. The gallery gasped. A collective intake of breath as Grayson's mask slipped, his hands slamming the bench. Turn that off! The audio stopped, but the damage roared. Reporters bolted for their phones, the few protesters cheered. Dennison's smirk faltered. Naomi pressed on, her voice rising. That's you, Judge, admitting bias and bribery. Defamation? This is exposure. Recuse yourself or I'll bury you deeper. Grayson's face purpled, his gavel pounding like a drum. You're in contempt, he roared, but the gallery drowned him out, shouts of, Resign! Echoing off. The marble. He recessed, storming off, his robe flapping, the courtroom buzzing with chaos. Naomi sank back, her crutches trembling under her weight, a fierce grin breaking through her bruised lips. She'd flipped his suit into her stage, his own words her weapon. The clip hit the news within hours, a firestorm online, character as Grayson taped trending globally. Protests reignited, bigger now, spilling from Atlanta to DC, demands for his removal deafening. Apex's stock tanked 15 points, Holt issuing a shaky denial no one bought. Naomi watched it unfold from her cell, a guard's radio her lifeline, her chest swelling despite the pain. She'd turned his $10 million noose into her guillotine, his voice the blade. She'd thought the infirmary was rock bottom, but this was a counterstrike, a legal knockout in his own court. Had she finally broken his spine? That triumph lasted a day. She woke to a guard shoving papers through her cell bars, his sneer wide. State bar ruling, he grunted. She unfolded them, her heart sinking. Dr. Naomi Jackson's law license. Suspended indefinitely for unprofessional conduct, it read, citing her disruptive behavior in court and the leaked calls. Her breath caught, her good hand crumpling the page. The bar Grayson's old boys club had struck back, stripping her career with a single stamp. She sank onto the bunk, her crutches clattering, her mind reeling. She'd humiliated him, turned his suit to ash, only for his allies to rip her livelihood away. She stared at the crumpled paper, her ribs throbbing, her leg a dead weight. Hours later, a guard escorted her to a meeting room, her public defender finally showing, a nervous kid named Eli Carter. "They're pushing the drug charge hard," he stammered, "and now this license thing, it's bad." Naomi nodded, numb. "Grayson's not done," she said, her voice flat. Eli shuffled papers, avoiding her eyes. "Bail still denied. Trials next month." She limped back to her cell, the clang of the door a final note in her unraveling symphony. She'd won the courtroom, shamed Grayson on tape, but he'd countered with a sledgehammer, killing her career while she rotted in lockup. The next day, a guard tossed her a newspaper, its headline bold, "Grayson defiant amid scandal." He'd held a press conference, his face pale but smug, claiming the tape was doctored, his suit against her doubled to 20 million. "She's a liar," he sneered to cameras, "and she'll pay." Naomi's stomach churned, her good hand shredding the paper. The protests raged on, but his allies rallied, spinning her win into his victimhood. She'd thought the tape was her ace, a public gut punch, only for him to twist it, weaponize it, and leave her jobless, caged and broke. Back in her cell, she sat on the bunk, the cold concrete seeping through her jumpsuit, her crutches propped against the wall. The bar's ruling echoed in her skull, her license, her life's work gone. She'd exposed Grayson's racism, his bribery, turned his courtroom into a circus, but he'd hit back harder, stripping her bare while the world watched. Her leg throbbed, her ribs burned, her spirit teetered. She thought of the Wilsons, homeless, Malik's fragile freedom, her own voice now silenced in law. Had she misjudged his power, his venom? She leaned back, her good eye tracing the cells, scars, names etched by others who'd fought and lost. The tape had shaken him, cracked his facade, but he'd rebuilt it with her bones, her career, his latest trophy. She'd walked in on crutches, faced him down, thought she'd won a round, only to limp out defeated. Her license dust, his suit a looming shadow. The protests outside were a distant hum, her name fading from hero to footnote. But as the bulb flickered overhead, she straightened, her jaw clenching despite the pain. He'd taken her job, her freedom, her voice, but not her will. She'd find a way, even if it broke her completely. Drop a comment with number 1 if you think Naomi's courtroom tape was worth the cost, or number 2 if she should have held it back to save her license. Smash that like button if you're stunned by Grayson's savage counterpunch, and subscribe to see Naomi battle this legal graveyard. Imagine her on those crutches, Grayson's tape her victory cry, only for him to bury her deeper. What happens when she's got no title, no allies, and his claws sink in tighter? Keep watching, the war's far from over. Dr. Naomi Jackson hobbled through Atlanta's streets on crutches, her gray suit tattered, her left leg dragging in its splint, her face a swollen mess of bruises beneath a borrowed hoodie. Released from jail on a technicality after her law license was stripped, she was homeless, jobless, and hunted. Grayson's $20 million defamation suit a noose around her neck. The courtroom tape had exposed his racism, sparked riots, but his allies had crushed her, turning her triumph into ash. She'd checked into a shelter near the interstate, a grim cinder-block refuge with sagging cots and flickering lights, her last refuge after the bar's ruling and Apex Realty's relentless pursuit. She sat on a cot, her good hand clutching, a burner phone, her mind racing. She'd lost everything, but Grayson hadn't won yet. She needed a knockout blow, something undeniable. Tanya Brooks had slipped her a tip. Grayson was keynoting a judicial conference at the Marriott downtown, a glitzy affair for Atlanta's legal elite. Naomi saw her shot, a desperate gamble to catch him off guard. She rummaged through her bag, finding a mini recorder Tanya had sent weeks back, its battery still alive. She tucked it into her pocket, her crutches creaking as she stood. The shelter's hum of despair, coughing residents and crying kids faded as she limped out, the night air thick with exhaust and possibility. Could she sneak in, trap him, end this? The Marriott loomed, its glass facade gleaming under floodlights, valets ushering suits inside. Naomi slipped through a service entrance, her hoodie low, her crutches silent on the carpet. She ditched them in a closet, leaning on walls, her legs screaming as she moved. The conference hall buzzed, judges and lawyers sipping wine, Grayson's name on banners touting judicial integrity. She found a corner near the stage, her breath shallow, her recorder on. He took the podium, his robe swapped for a tux, his voice smooth as he preached fairness. "Justice is blind," he said, his smirk faint, the crowd clapping like trained seals. Naomi's blood boiled. Blind? Only to his corruption? She waited, her leg trembling, until he stepped off for a break. She followed, hobbling into a hallway, her recorder rolling as he chatted with a grey-haired judge. She stepped closer, her voice low, cutting. "Nice speech, Grayson. How much did Apex pay for it?" He spun, his face paling, then twisting into a snarl. "You!" he hissed, his composure cracking. "You're finished, Jackson." She smirked, pain forgotten. "Not yet. Say it again, how you clear out black folks for Holt." His eyes darted, the other judge retreating. But Grayson snapped, his voice a growl. "You're filth, all of you, clogging my court. Holt pays, I deliver." Happy now. The recorder caught every word, his confession crisp, unguarded. Naomi's heart surged, her gamble paying off. She backed away, but he lunged, grabbing her arm, his fingers digging into her bruises. "Give me that," he roared, wrestling for the device. She twisted, her splint slamming his shin, his grip slipping as she bolted, half running, half falling down the hall. He bellowed after her, "You're dead!" But she hit the service exit, tumbling into the night, her recorder clutched tight. She uploaded it from a gas station payphone, Tanya's number her lifeline. "Air this now," she gasped, sending the file. By midnight, the clip exploded online. Grayson confesses, racism and bribery trending worldwide. Riots flared, Atlanta's streets a chaos of sirens and smoke, protesters smashing windows, chanting her name. Channel 7 looped the audio, pundits stunned, the DOJ probe reigniting with a vengeance. Naomi hid in an alley, her crutches reclaimed, her body shaking with adrenaline and pain. Grayson's suspension hit the wires at dawn, the state supreme, court yanking him pending investigation. She leaned against a dumpster, her breath fogging in the cold, a fierce grin splitting her swollen face. She'd cornered him, forced his own voice to damn him. Had she finally snapped his spine? That victory burned out fast. She limped back to the shelter, her leg a furnace of pain when the ground shook, a deafening boom splitting the night. Flames erupted from the shelter's windows, glass raining onto the street, screams piercing. The air. She stumbled back, her crutches slipping as fire trucks roared in too late. A dozen dead, the news later confirmed. Apex's hired assassins bombing the place she'd called home. Naomi's stomach heaved, her good hand clutching a lamppost, her mind reeling. They'd tracked her, struck when she thought she'd won, killing innocents to bury her. Sirens wailed as she staggered away, her hoodie soaked with sweat, her recorder useless now. The clip had suspended Grayson, lit the city ablaze, but his allies countered with carnage, a blast meant for her. Cops swarmed the wreckage, their radios crackling, and a voice cut through. "Witness says Jackson planted it." Her blood froze. They'd framed her again, pinned the bombing on her, twisting her triumph into terrorism. She ducked into a park, her leg buckling, her crutches sinking into mud. The news hit her phone, stolen from a shelter survivor. Naomi Jackson. Terror. Suspect in shelter blast. She sank onto a bench, the cold wood biting her thighs, her breath ragged. Grayson's suspension was real, his confession a dagger in his gut. But Apex had escalated, bombing her refuge, killing to silence her. The frame-up was genius, her name now tied to death, not justice. She thought of the shelter's faces, the coughing man, the crying kids, gone because she'd pushed too hard. Her chest tightened, guilt and fury warring inside her. Had she misjudged their ruthlessness? She'd cornered Grayson, thought she'd won, only for his machine to burn her world down. Police lights flashed in the distance, closing in. She stood, her crutches wobbling, her leg a dead weight. She had no home, no allies, just the recorder in her pocket and a city on fire. The clip had shaken the earth, forced his suspension, but Apex's retaliation was apocalyptic, framing her as the villain, while bodies piled up. She limped into the shadows, her good hand wiping blood from her lip, her mind racing. She'd exposed him, made him bleed, but they'd turned her into a ghost, hunted and blamed. Could she outrun this inferno? The park's trees loomed. There, branches clawing the sky, a siren's wail growing closer. She thought of the Wilsons, homeless like her, Malik's fleeting freedom, her own voice now a curse. Grayson sat suspended, his empire teetering, but his allies fought on, savage and unrelenting. She'd walked into that conference, faced him down, thought she'd struck gold only to ignite a war she couldn't win. The shelter's flames danced in her mind, a pyre of her defiance, her victory a mirage, swallowed by smoke. But as she vanished into the night, her crutches crunching leaves, her resolve hardened a steel thread in the chaos. He'd burned her life, but she'd burn him back, even if it took her last breath. Dr. Naomi Jackson staggered through Atlanta's shadows, her crutches sinking into the park's muddy earth, her left leg a throbbing anchor in its splint. The shelter's bombing still roared in her ears, flames licking the night sky, screams of the innocent swallowed by Apex Realty's vengeance. Judge Harold Grayson's suspension from her recorded confession had ignited riots, but his allies had countered with a blast that killed 12, framing her as the terrorist. Her grey suit hung in tatters, her hoodie soaked with sweat and mud, her bruised face a mask of pain and fury. She was on the run, a ghost in her own city, cops and Apex's militia hunting her through the chaos. She clutched the recorder, her last weapon, her breath ragged as sirens wailed closer. She needed proof, something to flip their lie. Her mind churned, landing on Grayson's chambers, a long shot, but her only play. She'd heard whispers in jail, guards boasting about his private files, a ledger tying him to Apex and beyond. If she could get it, send it to the feds, she might claw out of this grave. She limped to a payphone near the park's edge, its glass cracked, and dialed Tanya Brooks, her voice a rasp. "Grayson's office tonight. I need a distraction." Tanya hesitated, then agreed. "Protesters at the courthouse in 30. Be fast." Naomi hung up, her good hand trembling, her legs screaming as she moved. Could she pull this off, broken as she was? The Carson County Courthouse loomed, its sandstone facade a fortress under floodlights, protesters clashing with cops. At the steps, Tanya's diversion in full swing. Naomi slipped around back, her crutches abandoned for speed, her body hunched against the pane. She jimmied a service door with a stolen hairpin, her breath hitching as it clicked open. Inside, the halls were dim, the chaos outside muffling her. Steps. She reached Grayson's chamber's 3rd floor, her leg buckling with every stair, sweat stinging her swollen eyes. The door was locked, but she smashed a glass panel with her elbow, glass biting her skin, and crawled through, blood slicking. Her arm. His office stank of cigar smoke and arrogance, shelves lined with law books, a desk piled with papers. She rifled drawers, her good hand shaking until she found it. A leather-bound ledger tucked under a stack of briefs. She flipped it open, her pulse surging. Names, dates, payments. Apex's CEO, Richard Holt, scrawled beside 6-figure sums. A racist militia group, Patriot Vanguard, linked to bomb supplies. Her breath caught. This was dynamite, tying Grayson to the shelter blast, his empire laid bare. She stuffed it into her hoodie, her mind racing. Had she just found the kill? Shot. She called Tanya from Grayson's landline, her voice low. "Ledger's mine, FBI now." Tanya promised a drop point, a mailbox 2 blocks away. Naomi limped out, the ledger heavy against her chest, the courthouse trembling with distant shouts. She reached the street, the mailbox in sight, when headlights flared, a black van screeching to a halt. 4 men in militia gear spilled out, Vanguard patches glinting, their faces masked but eyes wild. "There's the bitch," one roared, a knife flashing as they charged. Her heart slammed, her crutches gone, her leg a dead weight. They'd tracked her, Apex and Grayson's final play. She bolted, a hobbling sprint, the ledger slipping as she clutched it tighter. They caught her in an alley, a fist smashing her jaw, her splint cracking as a boot stomped her leg. She fell, mud soaking her suit, pain blinding white-hot. "Where's the book?" the leader snarled, ripping her hoodie. She swung the recorder, cracking his nose, blood spraying, but another grabbed her hair, slamming her face into the ground. "Grayson wants you alive," he hissed. "Barely." They zip-tied her wrists, her good arm useless, and dragged her into a warehouse, its concrete floor cold, its air thick with oil and rust. Bound to a chair, her leg twisted under her, Naomi glared as they set up a camera. Their leader, a hulking man with a scarred cheek, grinning. "Smile, terrorist. You're confessing." He shoved a script at her. "I bombed the shelter," scrawled in bold. She spat blood, her voice a growl. "Never!" He laughed, cracking his knuckles, and the torture began. A fist to her ribs, snapped bone, her scream echoing, her sling torn off as they twisted her broken arm. Water splashed her face, drowning her gasps, her vision spotting black. "Say it!" he roared, a blade nicking her throat, blood trickling warm. She choked. "Go to hell," her defiance a thread in the storm. They beat her for hours, her body a pulp, her mind fraying but unbroken. The camera rolled, her silence their failure, her blood pooling on the floor. She thought of the ledger lost in the alley, her last hope slipping away. Had Tanya gotten it? The leader cursed, slamming her chair. "Stubborn bitch," and pulled. A phone barking orders. "She won't break, finish it." Naomi's heart sank, her swollen eyes darting, spotting a shard of glass near her foot. They turned away, adjusting the feed, and she lunged, her zip ties snapping her wrists raw as she grabbed it. Slashing her captor's leg. He howled, blood gushing, and she stabbed again, his thigh a fountain, her strength fading as she collapsed. She crawled, her leg dragging, her body a wreck, the warehouse spinning as shouts erupted. The others rushed her, boots raised, but sirens screamed outside, lights flashing through cracked windows. FBI agents stormed in, guns blazing, bullets cutting the air. "Drop it," an agent yelled, the militia scattering, her captor bleeding. "Out." Naomi slumped, her good hand clutching the glass, her vision blurring as agents swarmed. "Ledger," she rasped. "Ali," before darkness took her body crumpling into the chaos. She'd sent it, exposed them, thought she'd won, only to break under their knives, her escape a whisper from death. Agents raided Grayson's home that night, the ledger recovered, Holt's name bold on every page, the militia's bomb receipts. Damning. Grayson was arrested, his robe traded for cuffs, his face pale on live TV as feds hauled him out. Naomi woke in a hospital, tubes snaking her arms, her leg in a fresh cast, her ribs taped tight. The TV flickered. Grayson indicted. Corruption, murder, the ledger her victory cry, but her body told a different story, shattered beyond repair. She'd infiltrated his office, sent the proof, thought it was over, only to face torture that nearly killed her. The warehouse faded in her mind, the blades sting, the waters choke, her stab at freedom a fleeting spark. She'd broken free, barely the FBI her lifeline, but the cost was carved into her flesh, her spirit teetering on the edge. Grayson sat in a cell now, his empire dust, but she lay here, a husk, her triumph a pyre of pain. The monitor beeped, steady but weak, her good eye fixed on the screen, his arrest a balm to her wounds. She'd pushed to the breaking point, thought she'd won, only to fracture in the fight. But as agents guarded her door, she breathed, alive. Her resolver ember in the wreckage. He was down, but was she? Dr. Naomi Jackson lay in a hospital bed at Emory University Hospital, her body a patchwork of bandages, casts and tubes, the sterile room a stark contrast to the blood-soaked warehouse where she'd nearly died. Her left leg, now in a full cast, up to her thigh, throbbed beneath the weight of surgical pins. Her ribs ached with every shallow breath, her face a swollen mess of cuts and bruises from the militia's torture. The TV mounted on the wall flickered silently, its muted news feed, looping footage of Judge Harold Grayson's arrest, his pale face grim as FBI agents hauled him from his lavish home in cuffs. The ledger she'd stolen from his office, tying him to Apex Realty's CEO Richard Holt and the Patriot Vanguard militia, had ignited his downfall. a corruption scandal sprawling across headlines nationwide. She'd sent it from that alley, thought it was her victory, only to be kidnapped, beaten, and left bleeding as the feds stormed in. She'd survived barely, her good hand clutching the sheet, her spirit a fragile ember in the wreckage. The monitor beside her beeped steadily, a lifeline tethering her to the world she'd fought to crack open. Nurses moved in quiet orbits, their soft-soled shoes whispering on the tile, their glances a mix of pity and awe. She'd watched Grayson's indictment unfold on the screen. Conspiracy, bribery, murder, the charges stacking like bricks on his grave. Apex's stock had crashed 30 points, Holt's name splashed beside Grayson's. His suicide reported late last night, a rope around his neck in his penthouse office. The militia scattered, their warehouse raided, bomb blueprints matching. The shelter blast seized. Naomi's lips, cracked and scabbed, twitched into a faint smile despite the pain. She'd broken them, sent the ledger, thought justice had finally landed. Could this be the end of her war? That hope flickered as the hospital room door creaked open, 2 men in dark suits stepping in, their badges glinting under the fluorescence. FBI agents, their faces stern but not hostile, one lean with graying hair, the other stocky with a buzz cut. "Dr. Jackson," the lean one said, his voice calm. "I'm Agent Pierce. This is Agent Ruiz. We've got Grayson. Holt's gone." The vanguard's crumbling. "That ledger was the key. You're safe now." Naomi nodded, her throat too raw to speak, her good eye, the one not swollen shut, fixed on them. Safe. She'd heard that before, from cops who ignored her, guards who beat her, allies who betrayed her. She waited, sensing more beneath their words. Pierce pulled a chair, sitting close, his tone shifting to something softer, almost reverent. "There's something else. We've been watching you, not just since the ledger. Months back when you first sat in Grayson's court." Naomi's brow furrowed, pain spiking as she shifted, her mind racing. Watching her. She'd been a nobody, then a silent figure in the gallery, her navy suit crisp, her defiance quiet until Grayson scorned her. "Why?" she croaked, her voice a gravelly whisper, her ribs protesting the effort. Ruiz stepped forward, his buzz cut, catching the light, a faint smile tugging his lips. "Because you're not just Dr. Jackson, you're Chief Justice Naomi Jackson, appointed to the United States Supreme Court in secret last year." Her breath stopped, the room tilting, the monitor's beep spiking as her heart lurched. "Chief Justice?" She stared, her swollen eye twitching, her good hand gripping the bed rail, knuckles whitening. "That's impossible," she rasped, her mind scrambling through the fog of pain and memory. Pierce leaned in, his voice steady. "Not impossible, classified. The president tapped you after your work exposing judicial bias in Georgia, your papers on systemic racism, your quiet push for reform. You were sworn in off books, tasked to investigate corruption from the inside, starting with Grayson." Ruiz nodded, adding, "We couldn't tell you, not until now. You had to move blind, prove it raw." Naomi's head spun, her bruised skull pounding as fragments clicked into place. Flashbacks flared, unbidden, sharp. Her silent oath in a DC basement a year ago, a judge's robe slipped over her shoulders by a faceless official, her signature. On a sealed document, the words "covert operation" whispered before she'd returned to Atlanta. Her memory blurred by design. She'd thought it a dream, a stress-induced haze after late-night research, but it was real, buried deep, a secret. She'd lived without knowing. Her silence in Grayson's court, her notebook, her push, it wasn't just rage, it was instinct, a mission she'd forgotten. "Why hide it?" she demanded, her voice cracking, pain lancing her ribs. Pierce's eyes softened, his hands folding. "Because Grayson's network ran deep. Apex, the militia, judges, cops. You had to be clean, untouchable, a ghost they couldn't suspect. If they knew, you'd be dead before you started." Ruiz pulled a tablet, swiping to a photo. Her, younger, smiling at a podium, a Supreme Court seal behind her. "You were perfect, brilliant, fearless, black, a threat they'd never see coming." Naomi stared, her swollen eye watering, her good one tracing the image. She'd been Chief Justice all along, her defiance not just personal, but ordained, a scalpel to cut out rot she hadn't named. The room stilled, the monitor's beep slowing as she processed. her breath shallow but steadying. Every blow, the mob's bricks, Jamal's betrayal, the courtroom tape, the shelter's flames, the militia's knives, she'd taken them blind, thinking she fought alone. She hadn't. The feds had trailed her, not to trap, but to guard, waiting for her to unearth the proof they couldn't touch. "Why now?" she rasped, her voice firmer, her mind clawing through the revelation. Pierce smiled, faint but real. "Because you did it. Grayson's down, the ledger's ours, the system's cracking. You're clear to rise." A nurse slipped in, adjusting her IV, but Naomi waved her off, her good hand trembling as she sat up. Pain be damned. "Rise?" she echoed, her bruised lips parting, her chest tightening with something new. Not just fury, but power. Ruiz nodded, handing her a sealed envelope, its wax embossed with the Supreme Court's eagle. "Your reinstatement public this time. Grayson's trial's next, and you'll be on the bench, not in it." She tore it open, her fingers stiff, the letter crisp. Chief Justice Naomi Jackson confirmed March 2nd, 2025, to assume duties immediately. Today's date. Her breath hitched, her swollen eye leaking a tear. Her good one. Blazing. The TV flickered, breaking news cutting in, sound unmuted now. "Grayson faces court," Chief Justice revealed. Cameras panned to the courthouse. Grayson in an orange jumpsuit, his face ashen as agents led him in. The anchor's voice trembled. "In a stunning twist, Dr. Naomi Jackson, presumed dead in the shelter blast, is alive, named Chief Justice months ago in a secret probe." The gallery erupted, reporters shouting, Grayson's knees buckling mid-step, his head snapping up as her name hit him. He collapsed, a guard catching him, his smug mask shattered, his eyes wild with shock. Naomi watched, her cracked lips curling, a fierce grin breaking through the pain. He'd scorned her, broken her, thought her finished, only to learn she'd ruled him all along. Agents wheeled her out hours later, her bed rolling through the hospital's back exit, a black SUV waiting. Pierce drove, Ruiz beside her, the city a blur of sirens and smoke, riots calming as her truth spread. She leaned back, her cast heavy, her ribs a dull ache, the envelope clutched tight. Flashbacks kept coming, her silent vigils in Grayson's court, her pen's steady scratch, her defiance not just hers but theirs, a plan she'd lived without knowing. She'd thought she fought for the Wilsons, Malik herself, but it was bigger, a gavel she'd wielded blind, now hers to swing wide. The SUV stopped at a federal safe house, a squat brick building off the highway, its windows dark. Pierce helped. Her inside, her crutches clacking, her body a wreck but her spirit soaring. A TV played Grayson's arraignment, live, his voice a rasp as he pleaded not guilty, his eyes darting, searching for her ghost. Prosecutors flashed the ledger, Holt's payments, the militia's bombs, her name bold in every charge. "Chief, Justice Jackson's evidence," they said, and Grayson's head dropped, his hands shaking, her title a hammer on his skull. She sank into a chair, her good eye fixed on him, her swollen one watering with grim joy. A doctor checked her, muttering about weeks of recovery, but she waved him off, her voice steady. "I'll heal on the bench." Pierce grinned, handing her a robe, black and pristine, its weight a promise. She'd thought the ledger was her. Win, Grayson's arrest, her endgame, only to find she'd been the endgame all along, a secret Chief Justice tearing down his world. The militia's torture, the shelter's flames, they'd broken her body but not her purpose, a purpose she hadn't known she carried. That night, alone in the safe house, she stood, her crutches creaking, her reflection in a cracked mirror, a warrior's ruin. She traced her bruises, her cast, her scars, each a badge of the war she'd won blind. Grayson sat in a cell, Holt in a grave, Apex a husk, the vanguard dust, her ledger their doom. She'd walked into his court a nobody, taken his scorn, his mobs, his knives, thought she'd die fighting, only to rise as his judge, his jury, his reckoning. The robe hung beside her, a shadow of power she'd wield tomorrow. Her vow whispered into the dark. "I'll dismantle it all, every root, every lie." She sank back, her good hand folding the envelope, her swollen eye shut, her good one blazing. The TV looped Grayson's collapse, his shock her triumph, the nation reeling as she rose from the ashes he'd made. She'd been Chief Justice from the start, her silent strategy, her pain-proof, her victory absolute. The system had bent her, burned her, but she'd broken it wider, and from the top she'd shatter its hate, scar by scar, breath by breath, until it bled no more. The journey of Dr. Naomi Jackson teaches us resilience in the face of unrelenting injustice. Her story reveals that systemic racism isn't just a personal slight, it's a machine, grinding down lives with calculated cruelty. Naomi faced scorn, mobs, betrayal, and torture, yet her spirit never broke, showing that courage can outlast even the darkest odds. Her secret role as Chief Justice underscores the power of hidden strength, proving that change can come from within, even when it's cloaked in silence. The tale exposes how corruption festers in trusted institutions, with Grayson's downfall a stark reminder that no one is above accountability. It's a call to question authority, to see beyond the robes and gavels, and recognize the human cost of bias. Naomi's scars are a testament to sacrifice, her triumph a beacon that justice, though battered, can prevail. We learn that fighting hate demands more than words. It takes grit, risk, and an unwavering belief in what's right, even when the world turns against you. Her vow to dismantle systemic wrongs from the top urges us all to act, to challenge, to persist. What's the takeaway? One person's stand can shake a system, but it's the collective push that topples it. So what will you do when you see injustice? Drop a comment with your thoughts. Hit like if Naomi's fight inspires you, and subscribe for more stories of grit and justice. Share this to spread the call. Thanks for joining this journey. And here's to building a world where fairness reigns.